And in most cases, they have a hole in their business, right? It's like having a hole in a boat. Eventually you're going to sink. And so what happens is that they don't notice these little holes on a daily basis, which then magnify into a much bigger problem. And when it gets that big, it becomes a very difficult time to get out of it.
Business owners, the last year has been tough, really tough.
You were forced to close your doors. You laid off valuable employees.
Your profits were cut razor thin. You did everything you could just to get by. You're down.
But you're not out.
Don't you think it's time to make a comeback? Well, so do we. I'm Scott Williams.
I'm Tiana Burse.
Welcome to the Business Bounce Back series. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 1 of the Business Bounce Back series. This is a 10-part series designed to help companies rebound after all the challenging circumstances we had over the last year. I'm Scott Williams and this is my business partner Tiana Burse. Together we run a company called District Media Press. Featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, ABC, NBC, Fox. We specialize in helping small to medium-sized businesses evolve and achieve operational excellence. We're business coaches in the nutshell. Last year, we saw so many businesses struggling. We wanted to find a way to help, and that's when the Business Bounce Back series was born.
Yeah, and what you can expect overall with this series is a combination of podcast style, interview style, as well as workshop style, because we wanted to make sure that we are giving you guys the biggest impact, because that's why we're doing this series. Moving forward, what you can expect is to hear some examples from our own personal clients that we've coached over the last decade, how we've helped them grow, and what examples you can use right now to enhance and grow your current business. But for today's topic, we're going to cover identifying your weakest link or your biggest problem in your business.
Yeah, I think it's a super important one because I think most business owners, like us even, we come into work every day. The first thing we do is we jump on our email and we just start attacking the biggest problems that are popping up in the email. And sometimes it's noon before you look up and realize, man, all I've done all day was answer emails. And what I really set out to do was handle this problem, and this problem. So I think there's so much information coming in as a business owner that it's hard to fixate on what really needs to be fixed, what would provide the most value if you're able to fix it. And we spend too much time working on the squeakiest wheel that's happening. As business owners, we spend so much time working inside of our business. We forget to work on our business from a higher perspective. That's the purpose, I think, of today's episode, is really identifying some of those issues.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges with most business owners, if not all of them, and you just touched on it, is that they're working on the business, but they're not looking at it from inside the business. And one of the reasons why we're so sought after over the last decade is because of the fact that we're outside looking in. And so we're able to identify the problems that most businesses are not able to identify because of that daily operational, I have to do this, I have to do that. And they're not looking at, okay, this is the biggest problem. And the other part of this, which is even more interesting, Scott, and I've looked at this from, so many different angles, is they don't even know what the problem is. And in most cases, they have a hole in their business, right? It's like having a hole in a boat. Eventually you're going to sink. And so what happens is that they don't notice these little holes on a daily basis, which then magnify into a much bigger problem. And when it gets that big, it becomes a very difficult time to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, applies here. I mean, have you ever had someone give you relationship advice that was extremely obvious? And it's just because they're not in the problem. They're not so entrenched in all the nuances of either a relationship problem or their business or what have you, that some third party is able to come in and go, just do this or that, or put that here. And it's the simplest problem. So sometimes our work is relatively easy. It's like, well, we understand how to readjust a business and have it make sense. Sometimes it's obviously a lot more complicated because there's layers to the game. But I think that's important to understand is sometimes you got to hire an outside party to come in and look at everything from an overall, because you're so fixated on one or two categories of your business that you can't fix it. But I think one thing we run into all the time is, as you know, business owners who think they're different. We hear this from almost every business owner. Well, my business is different. I realized that you did that strategy with X business and it worked for them, but we sell a different product or we service a different customer base or whatever. It's always kind of funny to us. It's like our inside joke because all businesses essentially from the framework are the same. Sure, there's different, there's obviously different product sets and different categories and different customers. But as a whole, they're the same. It's like humans. If you were to take me and say, LeBron James and put us next to each other, you'd be like, what's the difference between these two people? You'd be like, oh my gosh, one's so much taller, much more athletic. I like to think I have a better hairline at least. But there's differences between us. You would think, wow, one's going to be able to be so much better in this area. And, one may be better in this area. Hopefully I'm, smarter at certain things or whatever. But I think the importance is if you break it down to like a DNA level, humans are 99.9% the same. When you look at a human's DNA, we've all got the same amount of bones in our body. It's all made up of the same stuff. So even though we may have different skill sets or they come in different sizes or shapes, just like a business, we actually have all the key core functioning principles and DNA of a business and of a human are exactly the same. So when business owners tell us, oh, my business is so different and, it operates differently, we have different customers, and we're kind of like, yeah, we've heard that before, but let's dig into the real issues because all the core areas that are going to be wrong with your business are the same as the customer up the road.
100% spot on. And I always say this all the time. I go, hey, when you're building let's talk about a flywheel for a second. If you're building a flywheel, and I touched on this before, it doesn't matter what company, what you offer. I mean, it could be product or service, and then we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But for me, it's the same process. It's the same business structure. It's the same brand flywheel, and the businesses are the same. You're right. I mean, I'm sitting here in this beautiful space, but there's a business next door as well that is doing a different business model. But guess what? We might be doing the same thing from a brand perspective or marketing perspective. So, we do hear it often, but at the end of the day, every business has the same fundamental core values, and we're going to talk about that in just a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll hit real quick on what we focus on, kind of what makes us a little bit different in our approach when we're coaching businesses. And what we like to focus on is improving 5 key areas of a business. We call it the core 5. Those revolve around brand building, sales revenue, profit margins, operational efficiency, and the long-term impact of the business. And I think there's an important thing to take away here. The whole topic of today's deal is, today's episode is to try to figure out what area of your business is failing the most. Because every business we go into, the owners always think it's revenue. If I just had more sales, it would solve the problem. But if you build a house on a terrible foundation, then it will crumble. And sometimes sales are not your weakest link. Sure, they're one of the key factors, one of the most important things in business. If you don't have sales, you don't survive. But that's not always the problem. And we find more often than not that sometimes it's these other issues that the business owners aren't even really thinking of. And we've got some examples later in the episode today that we can cover. But I think if you want to understand it conceptually, business owners want to understand it conceptually, they think sometimes sales is the biggest issue. If I had more sales, more revenue coming in, that would solve the problem. Or I've got all these problems and they all need to be addressed at the same time. But if you were to picture your business as a chain link, the old saying again, you're only as strong as your weakest link. If you were to picture your business as a chain link and each of the parts were, sales revenue and brand building and all that stuff was put together, and you were to pull the chain on both sides, only one link would break first. It's not possible for multiple links to break simultaneously. What that tells you is one was weaker than the other. So the approach that we have in identifying those key 5 areas, we go into businesses, we dig into the areas to try to get enough information about each to where we can find the weakest link. Then we pull the chain. And eventually one of those links breaks. And when one breaks, that helps us identify this needs to get fixed first. And sometimes that is sales revenue, number 1. But then it's operational efficiency. Because once you fix that link and put the chain back together, you pull again, and then it is something else, and then it is something else. So it's a constant cycle of improving your business as you're growing it, and you're obviously getting better and better, and you have larger and larger problems. But that's how we focus on businesses a little different. rather than just go into a business like a lot of coaches and say, let's get you, let's max out your sales revenue. And that's the only area that they address.
Yeah, and that's a part of the problem too, is because we all know this, every level there's a new devil. I talk about this on TV all the time, right? And whenever you're building a business, if you're not fundamentally focusing on these 5 core areas, then what tends to happen is that, like, you hit it, you said, hey, I just need to make some more money. We've had this example with one of our clients. They needed to sell more of this one thing. The problem wasn't that. The problem was that they weren't looking at the efficiency of their operation, because they weren't accounting for inflation, which means that their best-selling product should have been a higher price point to add to the bottom line. And one thing that's really important that I've seen is that a lot of businesses, they don't track or chase the money. They just operate every day, and then they pay a vendor this, or they do this, or they're not looking at the bottom line of their cost. And so what we like to do is come in and look at every single element, because without that, there's always going to be an issue. There's no matter what. I mean, here's the deal. Like, let's just be honest. Some of the biggest businesses in the entire world have been completely shut down because of the pandemic. That's not fair, and that's not okay. And that's one of the reasons why we launched this series, because we want businesses to bounce back, because over 100,000 businesses were forced to close their doors and not reopen. My favorite restaurant out here in Sacramento, which has been around for over a decade, is not opening back up ever again. And it's tough for me to like witness and see these things, because I'm super passionate about helping businesses grow and helping them thrive, and you are too. And so we have to focus on the 5 things, because if we don't focus on the 5 key core elements, it doesn't matter how big you get. Again, you will fall through the cracks.
Yeah, absolutely. So many businesses closed, and again, that is the key reason why we did this series. Is hopefully this will help a lot of business owners realize, hey, I'm not even thinking about those elements, or I have been thinking about them, but I don't have a solution or a direction to go. So this will at least give them some context to start working on it, understand that there's pitfalls that they might not even be addressing right now, and then fix them, because it's not, we often think as consumers, we often think of a business as just kind of an entity, but what you have to realize is, okay, that's an owner, and he employs 15 people in your neighborhood. So Tom, who was the general manager there, is now laid off, and him and his family are now moving, and his kid is friends with your kid. There's just a big social impact to businesses closing. And I want to say 70-80% of businesses in the US are small businesses. So that small to medium-sized business that was not able to have enough capital to weather the storm through COVID, because they just didn't have enough, they couldn't take on funds, or they didn't have enough of a slush fund that would get them through. Those guys closed, and a lot of them forever. And of course, we missed their food, or we missed their products or services, but a lot of those people will really miss their jobs, and the impact they have on the community. If we can fix that just for a few businesses through the series, if they can identify some things, do a little bit better with their marketing, get a few more sales, keep that person employed, then this series will be well worth the time.
I completely agree with you, 1,000%.
Let's get into a few things. Like you said, I think this is part podcast, part workshop series. We want people to have tangible takeaways and not have it just all us talking through every piece. But I think it's important that we hit some business concepts. So let's cycle through a few, and that way people can just understand. Maybe they're not identifying or addressing one area of their business. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, because I know we actually deal with this with almost every customer that we work with. I want you to talk a little bit about the importance of finding or identifying what your ideal customer is, because it's probably not everyone,
Well, and that's the caveat, is that we have seen businesses think that everyone is their target audience. And, it's the 80-20 principle. Let's talk about that. 80% of your revenue is going to come from 20% of a certain audience, just like 80% of our productivity is going to come from 20% of humans, right? And so the 80-20 principle is completely transparent across the board, which means that 80% of your revenue as a business is going to come from a specific target audience. And what businesses have to understand and look at is their data. And I know this is a little bit more challenging, because if you're dealing with hey, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to buy a bagel, you think, okay, it isn't like they're not able to track that data, right? But at some point you have to think about and look at it and really watch who's coming through your doors. Is it mostly females? Is it mostly males? Is it females between a certain age? Is it a certain demographic? And this has to do with a lot of variables, to be honest with you, Scott, like where the location of the business actually is, because that's going to be a part of how you identify your target audience. But you got to pay attention, because if you don't pay attention, then you're missing out on 80% of your revenue. And why this is so important, and this is the bottom line of it all, is that we live in a world where we have Facebook ads, Instagram ads, we have all of these platforms where you can specifically hit and target your ideal customer that can walk through your doors in a certain area, which would be your area, and you can target them. And if you know what that looks like, then you are completely able to know exactly who to target and really drive new customers through your doors and increase your bottom line within weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the 80-20 rule, because that's big to me. And I read a few books on it over the years. But for those who aren't familiar with the 80-20 rule, it was created by a guy who way back, a couple hundred years ago, was putting together data, and he found the amazing correlation that 80% of the wealth was controlled by 20% of the people. And that's the only study he was really doing. And then another guy got a little further, and he noticed that same thing with the land. The land ownership was, 20% of the people owned 80% of the land. After that, more and more people started getting into it. I don't remember who the exact person is, but it's called the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, however you want to do it. But almost in every metric in the world, like 80% of people live in 20% of the cities, right? 80% of the income goes to 20% of the people in a business. 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers. I mean, it's amazing how many correlations there are. So much so that efficiency in the operating system was adopted by Apple, IBM, and a bunch of other companies, because 20% of the processor was doing 80% of the processing. And it's just amazing how much correlation there is there. So the idea for us to, when we leverage that idea to businesses, is if 80% of your revenue is coming between to 20% of your customers, who are those customers? What type of customers are they? And if we just spend a little more time trying to get those customers, maybe we can increase that revenue. A little less time with the ones that, aren't your go-to customers. There's an ideal customer for every business, and you have to go find them. Sure, you want to service everybody, but maybe this is an age range, or maybe it's, a demographic, or an area, like you said, where your store is located, if you're kind of hovering around that. So it's important to identify who your real target customer is, because if you're trying to sell to everybody, you shouldn't be. And sometimes it can be really simple. Like, there's a million realtors out there, and I know a lot of great ones. Some of them specialize in higher end homes. That's what they do. Their customer is people who want $1.5 million homes or higher. Some specialized in lower income, right? They can help you get your credit score trued up and get into those starter homes. So because they have a niche that, that allows them to target a specific customer, and it's way easier than just throwing money out there and advertising and trying to get everybody.
And then it's more efficient. Okay, yeah. We're talking about operational efficiency too, right? So Absolutely. It's way more efficient to understand what that looks like. That way, when you are spending, a marketing budget of 30%, you're not wasting money trying to attract everyone. You're very niched and more specific. And I like it's called chunking, really. So you're kind of chunking down on that, which obviously you can save more money, and it just makes total sense. And it works. It works with what we do and what we show our clients what to do, and it just works every single time.
Yeah. And how you hit it right on the head with the advertising. I mean, let's say you start an advertising campaign, you want to sprinkle it out there and see who hits, if the sales that are coming through, if you identify what those type of people are, now you cut out everyone else, and then you target those areas because you're getting the most traction there. Operational efficiency, it helps with your budgets. I mean, there's a lot of companies, that we find, probably at least half, that aren't really addressing who their ideal customer is. We ask them who their ideal customer is. Oh, it's a age range between 18 and 65, men or women, any of these 4 states. It's just way too broad. I mean, there's an ideal customer for everybody. Doesn't mean you can't service the rest of the people. But if you're targeting marketing efforts and putting all that together, you really want to focus on a key area, just on a key area for everything you're working on. There's a analogy that I always like. the sun is huge and it warms everything, right? It keeps everything warm. It's addressing all customers. But if you take a magnifying glass and focus it in one area, it turns into fire right now, right? So instead of trying to warm the whole world, if you just put your focus in one key area, on one key customer, or on one key area of your business, hyper focus in that one area, you can make fire, which is ultimately what you're trying to do. It's the largest impact, not warm everything.
The sun shines everywhere, but it only burns when it's focused.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. Let me ask you this question, Scott. Tell me why you think mission and vision are so important for a company. Why is that?
Well, this is another one we find too. There's a lot of companies who don't have a mission or vision, or they do, and it's real foggy or archaic. It's written on a wall somewhere. It's just not really. If you were to ask the average employee, "Hey, what's the mission of the company?" They wouldn't know. You go to the CEO, they know because it's on a little crystal plaque or something because someone came up with it at one point, but then it kind of falls by the wayside. But I personally think that your mission and vision is really important. As an individual, you should have a why. Like, hey, here's why I'm doing this. Maybe your why is your family. You have a great wife and children, or whatever the case may be. You should have something that's kind of driving you. And for a business, it's no different. It's even a little bit more so because you have to have a specific mission, what you're really setting out to do, and then a vision, what your kind of long-term, bigger picture thing is. Most businesses don't have it. And I think there is a good analogy I think that I could use here. If you've got a goal and you're really interested in achieving something, maybe it's you want the sports car or this nice car, right? You're fairly young, you're getting your money together, you want to buy that dream car. Do you pick the car, or do you save up the amount of money that it would be and then go pick the car? You pick the car first. You want to know what you're doing. Everyone prints out that picture. They want that old Ford Mustang, or they want that whatever that old car is, or that maybe they want the brand new BMW, whatever it is. That picture is printed out. They put it on a dream board, or it's the screensaver on their computer, or whatever it is. But they're constantly thinking about that unit, that goal. You can't just save up all the money without having an image in your mind of what it's for. And then once you've got your 80 grand, then you go buy your BMW. You already have that planned out in your mind. You have the goal, it's attainable. You've made 40, you check off that you're halfway there. A business should be the same. You should have a mission and a goal set out of what you're actually really going to achieve. And that way, as you're getting closer and closer milestones, you get closer. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated. I think I've seen mission statements that are 2 paragraphs long, and that's too much. And I've seen them as low as a sentence. And sometimes sentence ones are so much more powerful. I mean, it could be, we talked about one of our customers who has a tire shop. It could be, our mission is to keep all the people in our area safe on the road. That's a good mission. And their vision could be that we want to service 250,000 customers by the year 2025, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but you need to have a mission. Hey, here's what we're really setting out to do. We want to keep people safe on the road. That's our thing. We're tires. It can be personal. Sometimes it's personal for the business owners. Like in the instance I'm talking about, that business owner in particular, it didn't even really realize what his mission was. But he had an incident when he was young in the car with him and his mom, and they got in a car wreck, and seems like it was due to tires. And so he kind of just grew up with that. And then when he started on a tire shop, it's ingrained in him that he really wanted to keep people safe on the road because it was kind of one of his true core values. But he never realized that and put it into words and share that message with his employees, and so they could all drive toward the same mission. So I think it's extremely important, and there's just so many businesses who miss on that. It's something fairly easy to do if you sit down for a couple hours in a conference room with the key people and figure out what their values are.
Yeah, I mean, and do you agree that, it's extremely vital because it allows businesses to understand their benchmarks?
Yeah.
There's a reason why we have, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4, right? So when you have that, it allows you to see, okay, this was the goal for Q1, we missed the mark, or this was a goal for Q1 and we crushed it. So I think it's all relative and it all aligns when it comes to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we talk in later episodes specifically about that, quarterly business reviews and identifying those targets and everything. It's super important. And I think a lot of people are missing that general business structure, but it starts with that. Hey, why are you even in business? It starts with your brand, that brand building. That's why it's the first one of our core values. It starts with your brand. And your brand needs to say something about you, and your mission says almost all of it, what you're trying to accomplish and the impact you're trying to make on the world long term.
And it also allows you, and we're going to touch on this too in later episodes, but it's your brand story.
Yeah.
You know, I talked about this on CBS just about a month ago. You know, we as human beings are all made up with different feelings. We're different people. And if you understand your mission and your brand story and why you're in business, it allows you to have a different kind of message to someone like me who may want to have an experience with your product, or someone like Scott who may want to know why your product should be consumed by him or bought by him.
Yep.
So there's so many deeper levels to this, and I know we're going to touch on it in later episodes.
Yeah, great point. I think that's key. Part of sales is your story, you know, and I think people think, hey, my product's going to sell by itself. But people want to know about his tire shop and kind of his story and what got him there. That moves people emotionally. And then people want to do business with people they like. They're like, man, I like that story and I like that he cares about people on the road. Rather than go to this other tire shop, I'll drive the extra half mile and go to his because I see it on my way to work every day. And I think that's great. Just that small difference in the ability for a business owner to be a little bit vulnerable and kind of let people inside, that wins over business for people. So it's an exercise that should already happen anyway, because you should know who you are and what you're doing this all for. But it's also a great exercise in marketing because people need to know who you are, and that's just part of the deal.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I want to hit one thing because we hit a lot of businesses that are a little bit older, and so they've been around for 5, 10, 15 years. Do you think that after you've been in business for a while, there's less focus on the core 5 areas?
100%. And I'll use this example. You know, we had a client out of Sonoma, wine, obviously, right? From Napa, wine country. And he'd been around for 15 years. I mean, and was doing fairly well. I mean, $5 million a year. That's not bad. 13 employees, again, not bad. But there was a lot of problems that he had encountered, which was he had lacked the ability to innovate, which is important. He had a very outdated website, didn't even pay attention to it because he had been around for so long. I'm making $5 million. Okay, that's fine. We got down to the root of it all, which was he wasn't keeping a lot of that $5 million clearly. So there's more going out than what should have been going out. He didn't focus on targeting a younger demographic and giving them more of an experience with the wine. And what we saw from a wine club perspective, we saw this all red, which meant that the last decade of wine club members, it wasn't going up, it was going down. But you know, no one wants to look at the red, they want to look at the green, right? They don't want to look at the negative in your business. They want to almost like ignore it because they maybe want to put a little bit of a Band-Aid on it and without getting down to the core issues. So what we did was we updated his website. We came up with a campaign to target a younger demographic to drive a different demo for wine club members. We retargeted the current wine club members, offering them a promotional special for a referral. And we did some other things, but at the end of the day, to answer your question more specifically, business owners who have been around for a decade or 20 years, what has happened and what I've seen, and this is just across the board, it's the same thing, is that they lack the ability to innovate. And when you lack the ability to innovate because technology waits for no one, right? Then you start to lose, or you lose because your competitor around the corner is paying attention and is innovating, and now they're doing this and you're doing this. And so, I mean, it's almost like see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. It's easier to ignore the 5 core because the pain of seeing the reality is what business owners tend to want to not see.
Yeah, that was a great business too. His issues, particularly, you almost hit all of them. He stopped pulling the chain to see what the weakest link was, but part of it was sales revenue was dipping because, you know, people were going somewhere else. And you're right, the demographic that they needed is the experience. Like, you know, we're both in our late 30s, and the big key for us is give us a little more experience, right? You know, the younger crowd like us in the wine world, we're the younger crowd. We want that experience. We want something that's going to stand out amongst everyone else. And I think that was the issue with him, right? When you pulled the chain, he had an issue there. He had an issue with innovation, which part of it was his profit margins. And then a big one for him that he was losing, which we rarely get to these with a lot of business owners. It's kind of the end, is that long-term legacy building, that fifth core area, because a lot of our businesses are newer on and they're not thinking about that, long-term impact that they're going to make. For him, he was kind of losing that piece by piece. And I think as he was getting older and his business was more mature, he was losing sight. And I think that's what prompted him to reach out. He was losing sight of what he wanted his business to turn into, what it was going to turn over in the end. He was just making his normal revenue, but I think he started in the business to make a larger impact, and that kind of went by the wayside, and he needed a refresh. And so I think that's what we see with a lot of older businesses is some of those guys, okay, they're making money. They could do a lot more things to be more innovative and bring in more money. But then also, how can we hand over that long-term impact to create something that maybe he can hand down or impact more people, or partner with the winery up the road to donate bottles, to auction off, to give to whatever. There's so many more pieces there that once you've handled your core stuff, your bills, your all that stuff, and you're getting a little bit later in life, you're like, man, what else can I do with my money, right? Like I could go on more vacations, or I could help St. Jude's or one of these cancer organizations, or there's just all these different organizations that you can help out. Those guys sometimes want to make an impact. They just don't realize how they could do it and utilize growth in their business to give back in their community because they think that they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah. And, now that we're kind of on the segue of talking about product, because wine is a product, let me ask you this. Is it better to pick a single product or service, or better to be the Walmart of any industry or your industry where you're offering everything? Specialize in something or no?
Yeah. It's really tough, and I think it's really tough for new businesses. New businesses have the hardest time making this decision because they want to service everybody, and sometimes they don't know exactly what they want to do. I mean, they're interested in 10 different categories or 10 different products, and they haven't dialed in exactly what they're most passionate about. But it's almost impossible for a new small business that's not extremely well funded to have a bunch of different products or services. You want to pick a category or two and go deep. You don't want to go wide, right? So wide is the Walmart version. Walmart sells everything. The reason they're able to do that is because they're able to employ a tremendous amount of capital to get that stuff for dirt cheap and squeeze small profit margins out of each product. And you go there because you can get everything from flip-flops to oranges to rice cakes to a stroller to an entertainment center, a TV, and tires, right? You can get everything there, but they have a ton of capital to do that. Most business owners starting out, you will not be able to do that, and do not try. You need to pick an area you specialize in. So we've even tried some stuff with this business, even before, well before I came on. You had several different business models you cycled through to try to figure out what makes the most impact. For us right now, business owners are needy, and they need one-on-one attention with us to really help them get over the hump, right? They need almost like a mentorship experience where they can get on the phone. We can dig into financials, we can dig into operations, and we can really come on in a consultative manner and really push their business forward with them, holding their hand, doing it together, and then we exit and they're operating a lot better. And so that's the biggest area of impact for us. So that's what we're specializing in, right now. One of my other businesses is a financial education business, and I would like to service everyone. But my expertise is around general financial education, but it's selling stock options. That's the expertise I have. I have specific strategies that I use and teach. Not every customer is my customer because the style I teach is a little more conservative. It's a little less high adrenaline. It's a better long-term way to make money, I think, that allows you to sleep at night. And so my customer is normally a little bit older. They've already done the adrenaline dumps of trading in the market and day trading and losing and the ups and downs. And they don't want to do that anymore. So my customer is not to try to go find all those individuals. I specialize in one key area of the market. I'm an expert at that, in my business, and business partners and everything on the other side and team. They're experts in that one category. And so it just makes us more impactful. We search for one type of customer, our coachings with them, or one type of customer, and we specialize in one category. And if you try to do everything, you'll end up doing nothing good. It's like what do they call it? The jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, you can't do everything great.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Here's a key one that I really want to hit, because we see it all the time and customers don't see it. So I want to know, what are your thoughts around companies standing out amongst their competitors, right? Like, why would a customer choose their business over all the other businesses they have available? Because most business owners, they think my product's the best. That's why. But I just want to elaborate a little bit on standing out amongst all the peers in the space.
Yeah, I mean, I use this analogy all the time. There's two, actually. It's top of mind, tip of tongue, right? So if you can be on the top of someone's mind all the time, you could be on the tip of their tongue, which we know in business, a lot of revenue is on personal recommendations, right? Even on social. I'd say that it's just like personal recommendations on social media, except it's more on steroids. It moves faster. It moves faster and bigger with personal recommendations, which we see all the time. If we have content that's created and then they're tagging their friends in it, that's personal recommendation. Same thing with personal recommendations to say, hey, I just saw a really good movie, Scott, you should go see it. Same thing, right? So I believe that you stand out based upon top of mind, tip of tongue. And I also believe that it comes down to a couple different variables, which is, how has my experience been at establishment A, and how has it been if I go somewhere else at establishment B? So that has to do with internal efficiency, operational efficiency, because if I have a really great customer experience at place exhibit A, I'm going to go there all the time. Why? Because I know the people, they're kind to me. They're like a family, right? And I use this because I go to the same restaurant almost every single day. Scott, they ordered a plaque with my name on it at the table, right? Yeah. But guess what? I also went to the bartender's wedding, right? So that personal experience for me is the reason why I don't go just next door and get the same food. Now, I can go get a burger from In-N-Out, a protein style, but I can also go to my restaurant that I love and get the same burger and have a different kind of experience.
Yeah.
So I think that those two variables make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. Businesses just think that restaurants are an easy example, because you really should get a full experience at a restaurant. You're coming in, they're seating you. There's just so many elements that they can clean up, right? Where if you're not greeted nicely, that's an area that could impact. Once you sit down, how quick are you getting your waters? How is the service? Is the food amazing? What's undercooked, overcooked? Restaurants are very hard to run and run really efficiently. So when you find one you like, you recommend it to everybody. I think business owners, I should say, that have a product, they just think my tires are the best, or my whatever is the best, and that's what should bring people in. Businesses need to be fun and exciting to draw customers in. Just like the wine company, there needed to be more of an experience there for everyone to draw them in and keep them engaged and have them trying out new wines and everything. A great example of that's super fun, you and I both love him, is Gary Vee. I mean, he took the wine connoisseur, mid-level wines, not high-end, trying different things and pairings and all that, and made those little YouTube videos, and they were absolute garbage at first, but they just got better and better, and he drew people in, and he offered a lot of free content. Eventually, turned into a massive wine company, and I think he recently sold Empathy Wines off. But it's an amazing story, but he created some engagement and impact with everybody. And as your population of customers starts to change, you've got that younger crowd now becoming the middle-aged crowd, and they still want to be engaged in a flashier way than the previous generation did. So if companies aren't thinking and innovating like that, like a lot of these older business owners we find that think if they just do it the old way, this is the tried and true method, it will always work. It won't. And you need to bring in fresh content, offer fresh promotions, find a way to bring people in. I mean, right now, a lot of the businesses we're talking to, we're letting them know, especially in California, they're now reopening because they were closed. Everything's reopened. What restaurant are they going to go to? If you're not offering free quesadilla for the kids or doing something that makes it better and make it like, hey, let's do this together. It's been a long time since we've seen you. It's time we had a chat again. Come in and we'll first drinks on us or whatever it is. If you're not offering something to draw them in, there is 100 other businesses that are. And so you got to be on the tip of their tongue.
Yeah, and I mean, it also goes back to I'll use an analogy too because I have a Lexus. You know, I have a Lexus. I don't get my car serviced at Lexus because I don't like the service at Lexus. I don't like the experience that I'm getting at Lexus. But I go to a really small mom and pops in the middle of the hood because every time I roll up and just park my car, they're like, "Oh my God, T, what do you need today? Give me your key." The experience is incredible.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of, and it's as difficult for business owners to control because sometimes they're not there. And so they're relying on their employees, right? Which is why doing certain internal things to create a better experience, not only for your customers, but for your employees,
Yep.
maybe benefits, promotions, giving them the same kind of, hey, we're going to offer, you know, a promotion for this piece of pie. But hey, if you go and sell a number of these pies, hey, I'm going to give you some type of promotional benefit financially or a gift, something. So there's so many variables that make a difference. And this is why we do what we do.
Yeah. Gamification of stuff, that's one thing that a lot of business owners don't think about. Gamification of stuff is really fun for people. And by that, I mean those little promotions. Hey, you sell this many and you get this, or you're entered into this, or you just have your top 5 sales guys on a board, and every time they get a sale, it's inching along almost like a horse race, right? To see who's out in front. People get motivated by that stuff. That's why Apple Watches are so popular, because it always tells you, oh, just if you took 70 more steps today, then you would hit this goal. That gamification gets in your mind, your little competitive sense, little spidey sense starts to go off. You go, yeah, I'm gonna hit that goal. And so if you don't have those goals out in front of people, your kind of mission and vision of the big goal, but then also those little goals like the quarterly goals or the monthly goals, if you don't put that out front, it's not going to get measured and people aren't going to drive toward anything. And anytime you can have fun, spirited competitions with your employees, it's just so much more effective. It makes it fun for them. It makes it fun for the customers because they're trying to give that extra level of service. And you're right. And when you were telling me about your car servicing folks, it made me think about my dry cleaner. So I used to live across town about 30 minutes, moved over here 2.5 years ago, and I still drive 30, 35 minutes back to my old dry cleaner because they're amazing. I pull up, they're basically calling my name from the window by the time I even really pull up. I give them my stuff. It's just the best experience ever. They're reasonably priced. They're not the cheapest or the most expensive, so it's kind of in the middle, but I just get the best service that I'll continue to go back there until they close. Even if it's 45 minutes, I'll figure out a way to still treat those guys well because I want them to continue to be around. I value that level of customer service, and every dollar you spend is a vote on what you want to keep around. So I want to keep them in my area.
And you're to tell 5 of your friends.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. The restaurant I go to every single day, the person who does my Botox in my face, she's made $6,000 from me saying,
Yep.
hey, if you like the way my lips look, go see her. She's the best of the best.
Yeah.
But that's just those little things right there. The best experience. She's not
Yep.
going to do too much, but then I'm referring people. Now that person just made an extra $6,000. I look like, oh my God, T's helping me out. And now I get my face done maybe for a discount or for free. But you get my example here. It's when you have the best experience, you then tell a few friends and then
Absolutely.
they tell a few friends.
Yep.
And the people that have gone to her, they've already told 3 more of their friends.
Yep.
Like she's so busy now off of just me telling one person, tell another. So that's kind of my theory on it all too. So I think that's how a business should stand out. That's
Yep.
the basic core.
You got to get your employees to buy in. Whatever you can do, whether it's incentivizing them, because the more people that have a great experience, they come back. A prime example is Chick-fil-A. It's odd when I have a bad experience at Chick-fil-A. And normally my bad experience is like, they took a little longer than they should have, or they didn't say my pleasure. And I find that odd because I'm so used to the great service. Where if I go to a Wendy's or whatever, and I'm sorry for both of those companies, but sometimes they basically throw the food in the car and they're not even, they don't even acknowledge you, and they act disgusted that you asked for ketchup or whatever. It's just the small things. If you can get your employees to buy into being really polite and nice and being interactive in their role, and incentivizing them for that, then you'll just have a much more successful business, and you're going to get all those reviews and you're going to get recommendations, and more business is going to come your way. There's something to be said for that, but it comes from the top down. It's leadership. It's always the level above is responsible for that. If you have employees that are terrible, it's either the leader or they're not the right fit and you need to go out and find the new ones. And a lot of companies hold on to employees much longer than they should, or just don't give employees good leadership and coaching where they could really develop them and make them into better people and give them more opportunities. And then the business thrives because everyone wants to live in their lane and make sure they're not bleeding their budget out to the other departments. So,
Yep, spot on.
So I think what we're going to do now is at the end of every episode, I think we'll take a business that we worked in previously. We'll kind of change the name and just a few of the details. We'll maybe round off all the numbers of the products and services. That way it's a little easier to do the math. But we'll talk about a real world experience where we go in and we tried to address problems from one of those businesses. So we had one recently. It was a food vendor, but we're just going to boil it down to kind of one general product. We're going to call it Bob's Bagel Shop. So it was a food company, pretty simple model, brick and mortar. People are coming in, one location, nothing major. And what we need to do first, what we do with every business is we go in and we need to pull the chain, right? We need to go in and identify which of those 5 core factors are the biggest problem area right now and then pull on it just to see what happens. So as you know, the biggest area that we saw with Bob's Bagels was profit margins, but that's not what Bob said originally. Bob said, sales revenue, hands down, I don't have any other problems with my business. And that was his story going in. We went in, got all the details, and we figured out it was actually something else that we could do.
And isn't that always the case though? Again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is that business owners they don't know what the problem is. So they're making all these assumptions. They're assuming, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So they're assuming this is it because they're like, okay, this has to be it. And then they get fixated on that. No, I'm looking at it, this has to be the problem. We come in, again, taking ourselves out of the equation, coming into an equation that we are not emotionally attached to, we're able to really identify the real core issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this one was fairly easy. This was a client that was just a 30-day turnaround. He said, sales revenue is my biggest problem. We said, let us verify that first, and he was apprehensive to that. But all old school business owners they all have egos, and we all do. We don't want to be told that we're doing something wrong. But in this case, we found it was profit margins. So we started to pull the chain, dug into a few different things. And what we noticed was Bob has a bagel shop, like I said, one location. And for the most part, what he does is he just sells individual bagels for the people in the nearby area. He lives by, his location's by a bunch of office buildings. And so he's got a lot of good foot traffic, pretty heavy millennial base of people rolling in, but also some like Gen Xers and everything in there that work in those office buildings nearby. But that's kind of his general business model. But it wasn't churning out enough profit margins, enough real profit, and wasn't getting enough sales. But I think we found the problem was actually rooted in the profit margins.
Yeah, and again, we identify the problem, and what we always do is when we identify the problem, we help with the execution, because you can go to the doctor because you have pain point, and the doctor's going to diagnose what the issue is, and then it's going to fix the problem, whether it's through A, B, C, D. And that's what we had to do with Bob. We said, hey, at the end of the day, like, you're getting overcharged for vendors. You're around corporate buildings. How come you don't have every Friday corporate account where they can come in and you can drop off your bagels, and now you're having more revenue? Hey, how about you add to your menu a meal deal? You're just selling bagels, but why don't you sell bagels plus orange juice or plus this? And so we identified that there was multiple layers of his issues that he wasn't even aware of, that we helped solve that problem. And within 30 days, he increased his bottom line. So
yeah. Incredible turnaround. And it basically went like this. We got into the business. We broke down each core area, just had good discussions with him about each, and actually looked at the numbers. What we found is that he gets a lot of his raw products from other vendors, and he really wasn't getting the best deal. And sometimes even though you're getting a reasonable deal, if you're not making great money, it's not a bad practice. It's not a practice that's outside the lines to get in touch with your vendors and try and negotiate new deals. So, we price checked all the core elements that he had for his base products that he made his bagels and OJ and everything from, and found that he was overpaying. So those renegotiations allowed him to lower those prices. The other thing that we found that was super key is there's other bagel shops that are kind of in the area, but we just price matched him up with everyone else. And he was undercharging everyone for the bagels. So you don't want to raise your prices, but he hadn't raised his prices in probably, I want to say, about 10 years. So at some point, you do have to increase that pricing to be on that fair market price, right? That fair market value. So we did increase his prices by a tiny bit. I think it was 25 to 50 cents, depending on the product. Renegotiated those deals. And just the profit margin piece, that was the weakest link, increased his revenue, his margins by like 11%. So without doing anything, within just a couple of weeks of renegotiating that stuff, he's already 11% better. Now, he thought sales was his biggest issue. And it was an issue. It was something that we addressed next because we got to pull the chain again to see what the next issue is.
Yep.
But we were able to do this really quickly. So once we found he had been overpaying and was underpriced, we made both of those adjustments. It increased his margin by 11%. Then we pulled the chain again and started talking about sales revenue. Because now that he was right-sized on the price and fair market value, now it was time to talk about how do we increase your sales? Because you're missing all over the board. You're only offering one product or service to a limited amount of people, and there's just so many better ways we could address that.
Yeah, I agree.
So one big thing for him too, I want to say was that we didn't touch on was he was not leveraging social media at all.
No.
And that's a key core area for you that you've been an expert in a long time. So maybe just touch on how we made just very small changes to social media and how it increased his business.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to top of mind, tip of tongue, I mean, we've been on TV because of our social media presence. So more doors are opened up, more people are seeing who we are because we were obviously present on social. And what we understand, again, is the ability to change someone's experience based upon knowing that we are all different human beings. So what we did was we added some components like behind the scenes. We posted more of the employees having fun. We we advised to do a campaign which helped them drive more revenue based upon their targeted demographic. We basically we made a funner experience on social, and that created a presence where people started to tag their friends. And next thing you know, you have new people coming through the door. And we asked the employees to ask them, how did you hear about us? Hey, is this your first time here? Yes. How did you hear about us? And what we found was a lot of the new traffic was coming from just being present on social media every single day, not even 7 days a week, just 5.
Yeah. Such a big impact. And I think we'd have to check back to see how much his business has increased, but I'm sure it's probably doubled. Because a couple key things happened, right? We hit on social media. We made the experience once they got in there better, like you touched on. He wasn't offering any type of meal deals. People come and get a bagel. He wasn't offering, hey, if you get a bagel and a coffee and an orange juice, it's less. So if you combo those together, people think better value and then they make the purchase. He wasn't doing any of those impulse buys at the counter. So maybe once after you've eaten that garlic bagel, you want some mints or whatever. So he added a few different impulse buys there. And then I think one of the big impacts that we talked about was getting those corporate relationships with all those office buildings around him to come in 1 day a week and offer bagels. So I know that those guys, since they were only getting bagels once a week, but if they knew, hey, this is the bagel shop right up the road, maybe those employees that were in that corporate deal visited his store as well. So we'll have to check back and report on a later episode just how his sales increased. But those were major, and they were honestly very easy. Like we said, this was a 30-day package, a 30-day turnaround that we offered to this gentleman, and we were able to make a pretty big impact just making those small tweaks. And he's a very smart individual. He was just, not well versed on some of these new tactics and things that we could use, and he just needed some insight from somebody who does this for a living. And so we were able to partner together. He's in a much better place. He's going to stay employed and still make an impact on the area he's in and the neighborhood he's in, and all of his employees get to stay employed. And so that's kind of why we do this.
Yeah, and isn't it fun, right,
Yep.
Scott?
Yep, it's awesome. All right, guys. Well, that is it for this episode. Episode 2, we're going to actually cover more on brand building, which is going to be a super exciting one. So stay tuned. We'll launch that one next week. Thanks a lot.
And if you guys want to work with us directly, all you have to do is go to districtmediapress.com, and on our website, we have a business qualification form. Just click on that form, and then all you have to do is add some information in there. We have some very detailed questions for you so we can really get to know who you are and what you're about and how we can help you. And then one of our team members or one of us will get back to you as soon as possible.
And if you also think that you've identified the problem and the problem is lending, because sometimes the problem is just a lack of capital, We do have a tab on there called lending, and I'll highlight it here. But we've partnered with a lot of different lending vendors to give us kind of some exclusive rates. And so if you've been having trouble finding a loan or need to find a place to look out to one, click on our lending tab, fill out the information, and you'll have all the options back within 24 hours. It's just a great option for you to go out and gain capital if that's what you're looking for.